Greetings to all in the love and light of the one infinite creator. My name is Jonathan Tong, and I am facilitator for the Seattle Law of One study group. We can be found on the list of study groups on the LNL Research website shown on your screen. We can also be found on Facebook. We do also meet on Zoom on Tuesdays from 3:30 to 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, as well as on Saturdays from 7:30 to 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. You don't have to live in the Seattle area to join our Facebook group or to join our Zoom sessions. All are welcome to join if interested and available. It's probably the best way to get announcements of future Q&A sessions. Speaking of which, we do also have a YouTube channel where you can find recordings of past Q&A sessions with Jim and with other members of the LNL Research channeling team. All are welcome and invited to enjoy them. And today we are blessed to be joined again by Mr. Jim McCarty for some informal conversation and questions and answers about the Law of One and how to apply it to our daily lives. How are you doing today, Jim?
Doing well. It's a beautiful day here, and everything, the blue sky out there, and countryside looks like spring, although it's a little chillier than that outside.
Wow, interesting. So you did get some snow a little while ago, did you?
A couple of weeks ago, we've had a couple of inches of snow, not much. We had 4 inches of rain Monday, though, and my sump pumps in the basement are still running.
Oh,
The groundwater is still providing plenty of work for them to do.
wow. Yeah. I do remember reading something about that in the Camelot Journal recently. Speaking of which, I had a couple questions for you from your most recent Camelot Journal entries. For those of you who have been following this or not, you've been writing in the last several weeks about giving us some sneak previews on your upcoming book on Living the Law of 103, the inner work. And you've included some really wonderful passages from Kuo as well as from Ra. And I was wondering how you go about finding those passages from Kuo. Do you use the search engine on the LNL page, or do you just have a encyclopedic memory? Or
No, I use the search engine. It usually works pretty well. So I can find out however many quotes there are on the topic I'm looking for, and then go through the number that I find and see the best one to pick, and highlight it, and cut and paste. So that's really pretty easy to do. The fellow in South Africa, Daniel Shields, that created our new website, did a really good job to make the whole thing searchable. So it's wonderful to have that feature.
it's super helpful. I use it several times a day, I believe. And anyone who has not seen it yet, if you go to llresearch.org, just click on the little magnifying glass in the upper right-hand corner. And that's a keyword search. So you can type in any words or phrases that you want to search for. And it will show you not just where those terms show up in the raw contact, but in the 1,600 plus sessions that have happened since then with Kuo and other of our friends in the Confederation. Really great learning tool. So speaking of which then, I do see a number of questions in the chat window, and I would love to get to those soon. I did have one follow-up question about one particular passage that you shared in the journal. I think it was the day before yesterday, and it was about open heart communication. It struck me as a really profoundly beautiful passage that I've never seen before, and it seemed to speak to things that I don't really remember seeing spoken of quite that way in previous sessions. If you don't mind, I think I would like to do a screen share and see if I can share that passage with you and with our viewers. It's more than a couple sentences long, so I think for folks who are more visual learners, I wanted to be able to share this. This was from a session in 2002 where Kuo said, "The first goal of communication is to open the heart to another entity and allow that entity to see your heart. In terms of energy, Communication is far beyond that which is thought of as communication among your peoples. What passes for communicating among your peoples is that which never achieves any energy level beyond red, orange, and yellow ray concerns. Much communication among your peoples does not involve the heart, and we would suggest that skill in communicating involves becoming a spiritually viable entity that moves into the heart, anchors the self within the heart, and only then turns outward with a willingness to share ideas. Were entities to invoke their own open hearts before each communication, we feel that much that is contentious among your peoples would naturally fall away. Beautiful passage. Had not seen that before reading it in the Camelot Journal. I can only assume they're kind of referring to Blu-ray communication as getting beyond red and orange and yellow ray. Did you have any thoughts, reflections to share on that passage and perhaps its implications in our very contentious times today?
Well, I think that it's actually is a spiritual practice that they were suggesting, that before we would engage in any communication with anyone else, if we want the communication to be most truly that which is within our beingness, that it is well to first open the heart, conscious, just set the intention that I would like for my heart to be open. And then, as Ross said, in other areas that you can springboard to whatever other energy center above the heart you wish to. So if you wish to use the Blu-ray of the throat chakra, then it would be more likely to be effective if it was based or built upon the heart. And the heart would imbue those words you had to share with the best of the love that is within you at this moment. Ra mentioned that there's love in every moment. And if we consciously try to connect to that love, which made the entire creation, then we're building our communication upon a firm foundation. And I think it has a chance of being more successful if we really do want to communicate with people and share who we are and receive the same in return of who they are, then that would be a practice that would help us to do that.
Yeah, appreciate your sharing thoughts on that. It just struck me how they noted that so much of our communication never really does achieve that level,
Yeah.
and that making a practice of it could be really helpful,
Yeah.
both in our
But
individual lives and in our collective lives.
oh yeah, I think it would be indeed, but it's something that doesn't happen very often because most people don't uh, think about that. They just go with what they've got, as the quote started off to say, and speak from their thoughts at the moment, and whatever they're feeling it imbues the thoughts then, rather than having the heart consciously asked to open.
Indeed. Yeah, and that whole session is beautiful. I enjoyed reading the whole session, and like every other session that's been channeled by the LNL team, it's just full of gems of love and wisdom. And I remember there was another passage where they talked about the value of group work and how there is a lot
Mhm.
of archetypical energies that would love to support groups learning how to communicate like this. So I guess that's just a little plug for all the Law One study groups that are out there, and encouragement for
Mhm.
people to join groups and
Mhm.
communicate with each other and share from the heart, which I hope to do today. And I would love to go ahead and turn to the questions in the chat window. And I see Aram has a question that she would like to ask. Aram, would you like to unmute your mic and ask?
Yeah, hi. Hi, Jim. It's good to see
Hi,
you.
Aram. Good to
Thanks
see you.
for taking your time to help us. My question is about ADD. I've been diagnosed with ADD, and so has my son. And I've been prescribed medication, and I'm wondering if it's harmful, and if it is, like what the Confederation might recommend as alternatives for treatment.
Well, I have to say honestly that I don't know what the Confederation would say, and I don't know if the medications you're taking would be helpful or not. I think it's probably something that is an individual situation, as most are. Um, Most of our medical community has a feeling that the old one size fits all. and prescribes the same medication for everybody that has a particular difficulty or need. And I guess that's probably the best they can do because they don't have the opportunity or probably the desire to investigate what people's individual natures are and what might have brought them to the point where they're now seeking assistance. So I don't know really how much I could help you other than saying that if you would take this thought of what is the cause and what is the cure of your particular situation with ADD into meditation with you and ask your higher self or your guides for some indication, some sort of a synchronicity or a coincidence that might happen in your life to point you in the direction that is appropriate. And it might be that what you're doing is the best thing to do. But I think that whenever we have a problem that we're not sure about, that it's a good idea to take it to meditation because there we have opportunity of communicating or being communicated with by not only our higher self or our guides, but the creator in many ways can show us a way to go. And that's usually something that occurs, it might occur right in the meditation, but it might occur after the meditation too, that something would happen for you that would give you an indication that there was another path or that this path is the one to take. So I wish I could be more help because I know that that's probably a problem that you've had to deal with for a while, and it would be good if you could get it taken care of and resolved.
No, that was very helpful. I've actually had a lot of guidance through signs and synchronicities. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, good. Good luck. Good luck. And I think your intention to find a cure is the most important thing.
It's a great question. Thank you, Ron. Did you have any follow-up questions to that?
No.
That's good. Thank you. I see that Curtis has a question he'd like to ask. Curtis, would you like to unmute your mic?
Good afternoon, Tim. How are you doing?
Hi, Curtis. Good to see you.
I have a question about the LL research site. When I was at the gathering, I met Daniel, and I was telling him that I'm in a group that we read a session every week. And he asked me a little bit about it. I said, yeah, we go to law1.info. He said, why don't you go to our site, LL Research? And I was like, oh, I don't know. I know. Then I actually sent an email a couple of days ago, and Gary answered it because I saw that when we were reading, it doesn't have the commentary in the LL Research site. So I was wondering what we can do to help benefit your site by doing things. And I just mentioned it now because we have a bunch of people in this group right now. Why don't we go to the LL Research site to read the Law of One, and we go to law1.info instead? So I'm trying to find out what we can do to help benefit your site with that.
Well,
Daniel asked me to have everybody go there to read it.
Right. When you go to the LL Research site, you get not just the Law of One, but as we mentioned before, everything that's ever been channeled, especially those of Quo. There's over 16 sessions, and you can find a lot more information there than can be found on law1.info. Although the law1.info has been, over the years, most helpful. Toby Wheelock's got that going for us in Virginia. And he offers a lot of information there that you can actually hear some of the recordings of the raw contact on his site. I think that will eventually, if it's not already happening on our site, that will happen too. But it's just that it's not necessarily helping LL Research by using the site. It's that I think that you can gather more information for whatever you're looking for if you do use that site, because it has more of a history to it. Over the years, starting in 1974 or 72, I guess, actually, Haton was the first entity that was channeled from the fourth density vibration of love and understanding. And then by 1979, La Tui came in and from the wisdom density. And the raw contact started in January of 1981. But also before that, there are other entities, Monka, fourth density, Oxal, fifth density, La Lima, fifth density, Nona, a very interesting entity I'm sure she's of the Confederation, but she never spoke words. She always sang notes. And Carla did a beautiful job channeling her. One other person channeled Nona. And there's a Yadadishi Iti is a very humorous entity. We're not really sure what density, probably fifth, because fifth density has a great sense of humor. So there have been a lot of entities that have been channeled through the years in LL research. So you have access to a greater source of information if you go there. And I guess one way you could help the site is if you find something that's not working just right, you could let us know. I've discovered here in the last couple of days, every now and then, the site has a little problem with the search engine that I think has been corrected now. So do you have any other question there? Does that cover your topic?
Yeah,
or question?
One other, I've been looking up on your site. I actually just learned a few weeks ago that I could search your site. You know, I didn't know. So I was searching and I found this person called Wayne Freeze. Are you familiar with that name?
Winfrey?
Okay, he's somebody that has a show or a call, and Carla's been on it very often.
In Sedona, Arizona. Yeah.
Yes. What is your opinion of that?
Well, I haven't been in contact with Win for the last few years. I was on his show for quite a while too. Carla was on his show for the last 4 years of her life when she was confined to a hospital bed because of this surgical wound that wouldn't heal on her lumbar region. And she was very grateful to be able to be on there because it gave her a chance to be of service to others while she was confined to her hospital bed. And at that time, I thought that Win was, very helpful in that regard. I know that Win has some of his own ideas about things. Of course, we all do that. And like I said, I haven't been in contact with him recently, but I know that he's been dedicated to sharing the law of one and other spiritual principles in general over the years. So are you a member of the group that listens to his program, or what is your experience with him?
I read his book recently, The Creator Gods, and I actually went on to 2 of his calls last week. Mm-hmm. But, I know he mentions that his group, I guess, there was somebody who challenged Ra also. And I was like,
okay,
a little wary of that,
Yeah, I had heard something about that too. We've had other people around the country over the years say that they were channeling those of Ra. And I've kind of looked at that quizzically myself because it's necessary that certain things are necessary to happen before you channel those of Ra. First of all, there have to be at least 3 people in the group, and it has to be a question and answer sort of situation. And the channel has to be able to leave his or her body and rest with those of Ra, so that Ra can use the body, not be in it, but use it to respond to the questions. And I don't think anybody that has been saying they've been channeling Ra has been able to do that yet. Who they're channeling, I don't know, but I doubt they're channeling Ra. I think they're probably well intended and may believe that they're channeling those of Ra, but I would just sort of, take whatever they say with a grain of salt.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate your question.
It's a great question, Curtis. Thank you. I think I saw Ukumoto had his hand raised. Ukumoto, did you have a follow-up question or clarification question to that?
Yes, sir. Actually, I have a completely separate question that I would like to ask if the present time is so appropriate. Mr. Jim.
Wouldn't mind typing into the chat window. We're kind of going in order of
Okay, I am so sorry. Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And I noticed Josh, I think, had a question about Winfrey a little while ago that he did post in the chat window. And I did want to ask Josh if you still have a question about that you'd like to ask.
Yeah, I do. Thank you, Jim and Jonathan. I really appreciate it. But yeah, Curtis shared that book with me. I'm in the process of reading it. Very interesting. So you answered a lot of my questions with your response to Curtis, but one that popped up, I'm very clear and familiar with the conditions that LNL was able to channel Ra trans channeling with the social memory complex. from my understanding in the book, there's an entity named Ptah who says that he is an individual high soul of one of Ra, social memory complex. If that being the case of channeling just specifically one entity, one social memory, social mind, body, spirit complex, do you think that's possible to channel a sixth density individual of social memory complex Ra?
When we were channeling those of Ra, we asked the question at one point. Don was wondering, when I'm speaking with you as Ra, am I speaking to an individualized portion of Ra, or am I speaking to the entire social memory complex? And Ra said, you were speaking to the entire social memory complex. There is no separation. So I would suggest probably that it isn't possible to channel just one portion. The conditions would have to be the same for all of the social memory complex because they are one being. They are at a point in their evolution where we are all headed. That is, we are trying to join together as groups to make it into the fourth density as a social memory complex. That's one more step close to the creator as in our journey of evolution. And at the end of the sixth density, they have actually become light, which is a fundamental portion of the creator. So we're all on the same journey. And when you get to that point where they are, there is no distinction between one port. There's a 6.5 million entities within the Ra social memory complex, but they are all as one entity, and there's no separation at all.
So none of them would operate individually. They all the time operate as one group.
Right. Now, when Don passed away, the Ra contact was no longer possible for us. So 2 years after he passed away in 1986, an entity by the name of Quo began to channel through Carla. And when we asked who Quo was, they said we're composed of 3 different principles. The social memory complex of Hatan of fourth density, the social memory complex of Latui of fifth density, and those of Ra at the sixth density level stepped down so that they could be part of this, but they could not be the speakers. Latui had to be the speaker, the voice, and Ra could only give certain images or concepts that then Latui would transfer into words and that Carla could channel, or anybody who was channeling Quo, which we channel to this day. So that's the best answer I can give you on that.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. I am familiar with Quo. The last question I have is in the book that we're reading, the main contact that he interacts with with the person who's channeling is the Council of Elohim. And which they say is a social memory complex outside of time that hasn't taken incarnation and is very involved with Earth in it, alongside Ra. Sounded like you interacted with Win, and are you familiar with Council of Elohim? Can you share any thoughts you have on them?
I don't know any more about the Council of Elohim than I've heard from what Win said. We've never gotten any information. We've never asked, actually, so that we don't have any information on the council and how they actually function. I could not explain that either. I just have to take him at his word to say that this is actually happening. I know that he has a partner who has been channeling with him for a number of years. And I know they work together, and I believe they produce a lot of very interesting and inspiring information. But I couldn't tell you about the Council of Elohim. I really don't know.
Thank you. I appreciate your answers. Is LNL involved or interact with Win these days, or not in a long time?
No, as far as I know, every now and then I get an email from him, and it'll be about some interesting topic, and I'll email him back and thank him for the information. Other than that, I don't believe there's any other interaction. I still consider him a good friend. I'm grateful for all he did for Carla in the last years of her life, because it was precious for her to be able to be of service to others, and he provided that opportunity.
Well, thank you very much. That's all I got. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate your questions.
Great questions, as always, Josh. Appreciate it. Curtis, I think I saw your hand up a while ago to perhaps ask a follow-up question, clarification question.
No, Jim answered that with his quote, talking about Quo and the rest. That's what my question. Because I know Quo was a part of Raw, and it's kind of related to what Josh was asking.
Sounds good. Thank you. I did want to go back to the questions in the chat window, and I know Daniel Steinmetz had a question that he wanted to ask. Daniel, would you like to unmute your mic and ask?
Sure. But by the way, I'm not the Daniel that was mentioned before. I'm much more newly arrived than that Daniel. First, I have a comment, I think, to Aram's question about the ADHD. I was listening to a verbal reading over the internet of one of the Quo readings that I couldn't tell you which one it was. And while ADHD wasn't mentioned specifically, neurodivergent, in more general terms, was spoken to. And I couldn't reference you where that was. You know, I don't have, I'm not going to search at the moment, but there may be some information that's not under directly the search term for ADHD. Anyway, my question is actually became an evolved question. My first question came to me a week ago, which was, I mean, with all of the fielding of questions, Jim, that you've done through time, what are some of the most common misunderstandings that show up that can be addressed? And then I thought, oh, maybe there's a more creative way to look at that. If one were looking at that body, and you can answer kind of either the first or this evolved version or both. If you were being of a proactive mindset, do you discern any key corrections you might mention at the start that would have the most ripple effect on some of those commonly asked questions or misunderstandings that are common to a lot of them, if you get my thrust?
Well, I understand your question. I just don't know if my library of misperception questions is very large. Over the years, I don't know, I think every question any person has ever asked, even might even seem to be misdirected, has always got the potential for having a positive outcome. And even though I can't tell you precisely the questions, I know that when I've had the opportunity to address a question that I felt might be somewhat off track, that I could give information that could maybe give more depth or layer or perception to the person asking the question. I don't think there's ever a question that is inappropriate. I think every question has the potential to give us information. It might not be what was expected by the questioner, but I think that's the way life is, that we go through life with certain expectations, and when those expectations aren't met, we think, well, that's a problem. How come that went wrong? But as Ross said, I don't think there are any mistakes. I think that everything that happens for a reason, and that we can glean information and inspiration out of whatever happens. So I think that's really the way I feel about it, for sure. And I hope that I hope it answers your question, because it's not exactly what you were expecting, I'm sure.
Does that answer your question, Daniel? Do you have a follow-up?
Sure. No, I don't need a particular kind of answer. I was just thinking, oh, if I could imagine myself, I might well have the train of thought, oh, I've heard this question before a number of times. And I thought, oh, I wonder if I should put out a response in advance of certain meetings, like people would go, oh, got it. That was going to be my question, or something like that.
Yeah. Well, I don't file away questions in my mind about, well, that wasn't a very good question, I'll put it over here in the not too good a question file. I think, well, they're all questions, so they all have the potential to produce results.
Yeah, my thrust wasn't about poor questions. It was more just correctables, correctable understandings.
Something like, well, he said the number 4, well, it should have been 5. Something like that. Something's obvious. No, I don't have any record of those either. People are unique. I don't think that there are questions of that nature that you could really file away. Everybody has their own way of looking at things. So that's the best I can do.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for your question. Sorry I didn't do better with it.
It's a great question. Yeah, great answer. Appreciate the thoughtfulness that went into that. I'm going back to the chat window, and I see that Raquel has a question that she'd like to ask. Raquel, would you like to unmute your mic and ask a question?
I do. Hi, Jim.
Hi, Raquel.
Nice to finally see you. You look beautiful in your blue. Guess it's your throat chakra. Okay, so we have something in common besides many other things, but we study the tarot. And I have a question. How do you personally use the tarot? Do you study it every day? Is it a daily practice for you? Do you receive messages? And do you use it in a capacity where you feel like you're channeling messages that you receive, you know, to the questions that you ask? Or is it mainly used as the tool that was given, you know, we had a choice to choose between astrology, the tree of life, and the tarot to kind of get more into the archetypical mind, which for some reason sprung up to me as very interesting and I need to learn more about this. So I started using it, but I want to know how you use it specifically, because you speak about it and you have depth of understanding, but do you use it in your daily practice or in your life?
I don't use it in the daily practice of my life at this time. I have used it extensively in the past as a means of getting a better grasp on how I'm using my catalyst of a daily nature and how I can balance that catalyst as Ross suggested. The tarot seems to be a sort of like a roadmap to help us make it through the third density in a more efficient way, to look at what happens to us in our daily lives as food for thought and food for growth. So in that regard, it does have its echoes in a daily way, especially in my meditations, as I go in there, especially in the early morning, and feel that there is a kind of a communication occurring that gives me more indication as to what I should be focusing on in my life at this time. Interestingly, though, that you ask about the tarot right now, because within the last 4 days, I've been working with a new book that one of our friends of LNL Research has written about the tarot, and they're redrawing the cards, and it's a very interesting book, and it'll probably be available sometime in the next few months. It stays true to what Ra gave, but they're redrawing the images in another fashion so that I think that there might also be other sources that have been used in this book to get other principles that would go along with Ra's and be in agreement, be those somewhat different. And so I'm getting another take on the entire process of using the archetypical mind and the various images in it by reading this particular book. And I'm about halfway through it. And so I think that is probably one of the things that I like most about the archetypical mind, is that Ross suggested that each student would have its own way of looking at each of the images or facets. So when we want to use them in our daily lives, we can take what Ross said about the image, and maybe we could find another, look at it as a gem or a crystal, and there'd be different ways of looking at that facet and apply it to ourselves, because we're all individual beings. So that's the best I've got right now for you. I do really appreciate the tarot and the archetypical mind. I think that is some of the information that we got in the raw contact that was beyond the normal spiritual information that most people study. And I think that there are certain groups around the country, and there have been probably for hundreds of years, that have been coming from that same direction. Maybe not exactly that direction, but I believe it well, going all the way back to the 11,000 years ago in Egypt when Ra was there. I think that people have been studying it in some regard, in some way, for thousands of years. So I'm sorry I can't do better on that question too.
Oh, that was great. I mean, that was more than enough. I know Jonathan always asks, do you have a follow-up? I kind of have a little follow-up. So what do
Okay.
you think about the many people that are now springing up a lot of channels, saying that they're channeling the tarot, using it? And from what I get, like even just from listening to you, when you discuss the tarot, you have, like I said, a more depth of understanding, especially using the original decks, because there's thousands of decks now, right? And what do you think about people channeling messages saying that, this could relate to your life, and, people really taking on this information as though it's like, yes, it resonates, it's perfect, like, thank you, you gave me a good reading. But do you feel that this might be channeling from negative sources and kind of bringing more confusion to a person's attempt to already dive into their archetypical mind and figure out, through messages through the tarot and how they relate to their life? Do you understand like what I'm saying about that? Like, people are like, yeah, I got this message from this reader and it feels like it resonates, but then it's like, is it a real message, or is it just like to add more confusion to their reality and to their study?
I think that any person that's working with the tarot in that way as a channel has the possibility of being across the entire spectrum of really good, accurate information to, no, that's not very accurate at all. That's not very helpful. I think it all depends upon the channel and what they do in the way of preparing to work with the tarot and be a channel.
Yeah.
Carla found that if you channel any kind of source, you need to tune yourself to a certain level or frequency that gives you the ability to channel your highest and best at that moment. And then the next thing you need to do before there is any contact made with anybody of a discarnate nature, that you challenge them in whatever is the heart of your spiritual journey, that for which you live and that for which you would gladly die. And in Carla's case, she challenged the name of Jesus Christ because she had experiences with Jesus from the age of 2. So if you go through the tuning and the challenging process, I think you've done everything that you can do, and that you have a much better possibility of sharing information that is helpful to whoever is asking you for this information. But I think in any case, you as a person maybe asking a channel to a certain question, you don't know what they've done.
Yeah.
So all you can do is use your own discrimination, your own intuition to determine if what has been given you as an answer to your question is correct, is helpful. And that, again, you can decide either immediately by your intuition, or you can go into meditation and think about it. And whatever the background was of the person, however they behaved, whether they tuned or challenged or not, that information could still be valuable to you. And you are the one that determines that by how you feel intuitively and from your heart.
That's a good perspective. Thank you, Jim.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your question.
Appreciate your answer. Thank you.
Great questions, Raquel. Thank you. And thanks for anticipating the follow-up question.
I anticipated it, Jonathan.
Well done. I have a question that was submitted in writing by somebody who was not able to join us today. That is Christian Foster. I'm going to read the question as written, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing words. Christian says, Ra talks about the other planes within third density, specifically the astral and devacanic planes in session 17, question 37. Has Jim, Carla, or Don, to Jim's knowledge, or anyone else present with the L&L research team, ever pursued working with their green ray bodies or blue ray bodies, in parentheses, respectively, the astral body and devacanic body, sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, in any capacity, specifically that of astral travel? And I'm guessing the possibility exists for devacanic travel if the body is activated. Does that question make sense to you, Jim?
Oh, the question makes sense, and the answer is really easy. No. As to my knowledge, Don or Carla, and I know I haven't. Although from time to time, I've been reading a Wanderer's Handbook recently, and I've just started reading it again since I recorded it back in December of 2015. So I'm discovering some things in there that I had forgotten. And sometimes Carla speaks of these experiences with the light that she had, and she was in the light for a while. and it was very inspiring. And I didn't remember that. So I'm not sure if she was out of her body. I kind of doubt it, but she was having a spiritual experience that was very inspiring to her, and she was writing about it. So other than that, I think the answer is no.
Thank you. And for my own edification, how do you pronounce that word? Devacanic? Devacanic?
Yeah, devacanic. Yeah,
Dev-
devacanic. I think it's devacanic.
Thank you. Moving on to our questions, I saw that Jasmine had a question that she wanted to ask. Jasmine, would you like to unmute your mic and ask?
Sure, thank you. Good morning, Jonathan. Good morning, Jim. My question, hi, it's pretty basic. I was wondering if in the raw content, there's any suggestions on how to protect oneself continuously from greetings by negatively polarized entities, particularly if you have already made your choice and you choose the path of positivity. How is there a way to have this like permanent shield up so that you're not always getting these little greetings that you don't want?
Yeah. Ra had a suggestion for us. It wasn't something that they said this is going to work for you as a permanent type of thing. They said anytime that you feel like you have been psychically greeted, that what you would do in your meditation is send love and light to the entity that's greeting you. And then you would send love and light to the greeting, whatever form it took. Then you would send love and light to yourself and the creator, and you would shield yourself with an armor of light. And that was the basic principle they gave us. Now, I think that after a period of time, if you do this with a negatively oriented entity, they decide that they probably want to give up trying to attack you because they do not like getting love and light sent to them. It's sort of repulsive to them because that's not their way. So that would be my suggestion. But the idea, though, is not that you want to make them go away by sending them love and light. It's that you see them as a brother or sister traveling the same path you're traveling, not quite the same right now, but at the sixth density level, they'll have to give up the negative path and take on the positive path. And after all, we are all one with everyone. So we send love and light to everyone, even those who seem to attack us, not to make them go away. That's just a nice side effect. But because that's the way it is, because we do send them love and light. We see them as brothers and sisters. We see them in a different way than they see us. And we will see each other again in mid-sixth density and say, yeah, hello, good to see you again. Big hugs all around.
Okay, so again, that was send love and light to the entity itself or himself, herself, send love and light to the actual greeting, and there was a third?
Send it to yourself.
Oh, to myself, of course.
And ask the creator to send it to yourself too.
Thank you. No follow-up question.
Thank you, Jasmine.
Thank you, Jasmine. So send love and light and don't throw shade at them is what I'm hearing. Because you would probably like the shade, I'm guessing. Yeah. Thank you so much. I saw that Ragnar had a question he wanted to ask. Ragnar, would you like to unmute your mic and ask?
Hi, Jim.
Hi, Ragnar.
So I think I read somewhere that before you got involved with LL research, you were like living off the grid in a log cabin. Is that true?
Yeah.
That's very interesting. I wouldn't imagine the Venn diagram between rugged outdoorsman and new age spiritual teacher have a ton of overlap. It's fascinating. Wondering about the transition there. Did you have any significant acclimation period before you found yourself giving serious consideration to new age spiritual concepts like chakras, reincarnation, etc.? Or did those things just sort of fall into place for you like right off the bat?
It was the activation of my indigo chakra that took me to the land. I went to a survival school. It's called the Adventure Trail Survival School in Black Hawk, Colorado, about 40 miles west of Denver. And the fellow there had the theory that if you could use your dreams and journaling and neurodramas to remove the blockages that keep your brain from naturally sending its energy into the frontal lobes, then it would do that. So I used the process of dreaming and got messages in my dreams and the journaling of the messages, what they meant to me and where they came from. And then we used a process called neurodrama that we reenacted the situation that occurred to us when we were children that gave us this negative blockage, this negative programming that kept our energy from going forward. Now, what I think this really is dealing with is our pre-incarnative choices, the challenges we give ourselves. And those challenges are something that if we can address them clearly and intensively, can help us to get that energy going into the frontal lobes. Well, it was successful in my case. In the morning of July 12th, 1972, just as I was coming out of sleep, I felt a click at my third eye, and I felt my brain circulating like a cyclotron. And it was an extreme pleasure and pressure that continued for a number of years as frontal lobes experiences. It was like an orgasm in the brain. So the theory of the teacher there at the survival school was each one teach one. Go out, buy some land, start your own school, and provide this type of study for other people. So that's when I moved to the land in central Kentucky, about 70 miles from here, down in Marion County. And I was back up creek and about a couple miles away from anybody else that was living in the area. And I built a log cabin, stayed there for 6.5 years. I provided the course for 2 years. And then one evening, May 29th, 1979, I had a battery powered radio, and I heard Don and Carla being interviewed on a radio station in Lexington, Kentucky, WKQQ. And they were talking about UFOs, but they weren't talking about physical UFOs. They were talking about communicating with UFOs. And I really was interested in that because the message they were giving us really inspiring. So it was about 4 or 5 months later that in that area, there were a lot of people back to the land, hippies. It was the back to land movement, college educated hippies going back to the land to form communities, following Thoreau's idea of simplify your lives, grow your own food, build your own houses, homeschool your children. So we had a food co-op to buy food we couldn't grow ourselves. And one day I was at one of those meetings when we were placing our order, and I was talking to a couple from the other side of the same county I lived in. And I told them about this, hearing this information about Don Elkins and Carla Ruckert. And they said, well, we're members of their channeling group. We'll introduce you to them. So from that point on, for the next year, I drove up to Louisville to be part of Don and Carla's channeling group. And they invited me to join them. So I did. So that's how it all happened.
Fascinating. So you were already on the path. Yeah, things really fell into place, didn't they?
Yeah.
Very nice.
The synchronicities.
Yeah. Well, that's very cool. I'll be chewing on that for a while. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ragnar.
It's a great question, Ragnar. Thank you for asking. That was something I actually had been meaning to ask Jim for a while, because I know you've made a few references to the Adventure Survival School and brain control therapy in the Camelot Journal. And I was going to ask you at some point to share some experiences on that. So thank you, Ragnar, for making it happen. Let's see, I am going to go back to the chat window, and I did want to let folks know we're coming up towards the end of our hour. We got roughly 10 minutes left, and I do see 4 questions still. But if you still have a question that you would like to ask, feel free to put in the chat window, and we will make sure that you have a chance to do that. Otherwise, I saw that Michael had a question that he wanted to ask. Michael Powery, would you like to unmute your mic and ask?
Yes, hello. Great to be here. Hi, Jim. Thank you for answering our questions. I have a question about fasting, and I would just like to know if you can maybe do it in the short window of time we have, give us a rundown of maybe your personal experiences with fasting. And if you could maybe, if there's time, in layman's terms, talk about what Ra, I believe, was talking about when they said fasting was a way of clearing unwanted thought forms, I think is what they said. Right. That would be great. Thank you.
Well, that has been my experience with fasting. That's been the reason I have fasted probably 4 or 5 times over the last 8 or 9 years. And that was to remove a negative thought form that I felt was inhibiting my spiritual journey. Something that the mind, sometimes the mind gets some concept or feeling going, and you just want to tell it to shut up, but it keeps going with it. So I used the fasting to do that. And that's exactly what Ross said, that if you use the fasting as a symbol for the stopping of taking food to being the symbol for the stopping of the thought form, then that would be effective for that. And you would need to be sincere in your desire to do that. So I would meditate and think about how much I wanted to get rid of that thought form, why I did, and what the positive results could well be. So after doing that, then I usually entered into a 3-day fast. And I would use just water or maybe orange juice, something like that, some liquid, because you need to keep the liquids flowing in your body during the fasting time. And after that period of time, I would, the 3 days, I would slowly go back on foods, feeling after I got the thought form removed that it was time then to do the food. So that's been my experience. And I felt that, and I feel that it was successful. And I think that anybody can use that. Ra also mentioned that it was possible, if you really wanted to do it and you had the faith and the will that was strong enough, that you could just decide not to have that thought any longer and to eliminate it from your thought patterns. And I think that's a special technique that I have not tried that one. I've used the fasting because for me, the symbolism of stopping the food and stopping the thought was important.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael.
Any follow-up questions, Michael? We have time if you have a follow-up question.
No, that's great. That's exactly what I needed to hear. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Ukamoda, I believe, has a question he's been meaning to ask for a while. Would you like to unmute your mic and ask?
It would be an honor, Jonathan, and good morning, Jonathan. Grand Rising, Jim. I'm not going to waste your time by telling you how much this means to me, but what I will do is ask you a quick question. And the question is as follows, Brother Jim. It is well settled that karma is an ailment, shall we inconveniently call it. The entities with the density 3 operate under as a condition of catalytical manifest. But what of the possibility of karma applying to entities above the 3rd density? One of the foundations for this particular inquiry is a mention in volume 1 of the raw material, where it is mentioned of Ra never having left due to the responsibility that was connected to our people's deifying Ra, due to the manner of which they had appeared amongst the ancient Egyptians. Thus, the question is so presented, Brother Jim. Does the statement glean that upper density beings are subject to being karmically involved, much akin and or similarly to those of 3rd density? Is it possible for and 4th and up density entity to be, by all rights and respects, stuck, shall we say, to a certain catalytical burden due to their actions along their path?
Well, that's a great question, Yukamoto. I think that for 3rd density entities, Ross suggested that forgiveness was the stoppage of the karma. And I think that for the higher densities, such as Ra, when they were worshipped by the Egyptians and the Egyptians took the information that they gave them concerning the law of one and used it for the royal and powerful only, that Ra felt that they had made a mistake in being able to be there and not understanding that something like this could happen. They kind of, in a number of cases, suggested they were naive and that their naivete was a great source of difficulty for them. And I think this is what they felt with the Egyptians, in that they decided that they would attempt to balance the distortions that were given to a law of one by their time of walking among the Egyptians 11,000 years ago, by being available to this planet in whatever way possible to alleviate what we would call karma and what they felt was an honor/responsibility. And they, over the years, they made contact with those of Akhenaten about 3,300 years ago. And he was able to decree the law of one as the law of Egypt. But at his death, the priests who had only given lip service to it went back to the worship of many gods afterwards. So that had limited effect as well. And throughout succeeding years, they would work with people in dreams. and give them inspiring dreams, especially with wanderers, to help wake them up so that they could do their work on planet Earth to help lighten the vibrations of the planet. And when we were able to make contact with Ra, they finally found the situation they felt was the most useful to begin to balance those distortions in the law of one. So we were very grateful to also have that contact and to help them do that. So we were able to have 106 sessions with them and gather a lot of information about spiritual evolution that hopefully would balance the distortions in the law of one that were created 11,000 years ago. And Don at one point asked Ra if we were being successful in this attempt to aid them in balancing those distortions. And they said that they really did not ever expect to balance them, but the attempt was what was most important. And they were grateful for our work in that. So I think that's true for everybody as a spiritual seeker. We cannot know exactly where we are in our spiritual journey. Carla said you can't take your own spiritual temperature. You just have to go forward to the best of your ability and have faith that you are doing your best, and just keep doing that. So I hope that answers your question, Yukamoto.
I do have one follow-up question.
Okay.
Jim, we never know when it's our time to go. And some things we only experience once. So the follow-up question really is just me saying to you that I love you and thank you for what you did 50 plus years ago.
Well, Yukamoto, thank you so much. I know none of us know when it's time to go, but when it's time to go, it's the right time. And we can be assured that we did our work. We did our spiritual journeys. And I'm sure that's true for you too. And I love you too.
So beautiful. Thank you. And that's what we mean by heart-to-heart sharing, ladies and gentlemen. Special. Appreciate it. I see that Yuan also has a question he's been waiting a while to ask. Yuan or Randolph, would you like to ask your question?
Oh, yeah, it's better. Hi, Jim. I will share a personal experience. I first noticed it like a few years ago when I was talking to one of my professors back then, and I noticed there is somehow an impulse to aggression or violence, like it pushes you on to hurt these people, but it's like it's rising up, and you can see clearly that it rises up from a certain part of the body. Like, yeah, and later I talked this with one of my friends who also said they had similar situations. Yeah. So I'm wondering, is there any metaphysical explanation for this, like impulses of aggression?
Now this was the professor that had this rising up in his being for.
I know it's one of my professors, and when I was chatting with him, and I noticed there is one like an uncontrollable impulse rising up like through the open part of my body.
In people in general, you mean?
You know, quite general, yeah. Like you can feel it. I mean, you are not like being trapped by that feeling, but you can see clearly that there is certain energy rising up, and it's not a blockade. I mean, if it's a blockade, it's on certain part of the body, like a blocked here, but it feels like it's rising up. Yeah, so weird feeling. Yeah, and I noticed now even the conversation is very well, like you two enjoy your chatting, but for some people especially, you can encounter this kind of phenomenon. Yeah.
Well, I think different people have various kinds of experiences with both their bodies and their minds and their emotions. And sometimes there's really no way to tell why it's happening. It could be something that's pre-incarnatively chosen. It could be something that was a damaging experience as a child that caused them to have to feel this way, and that as they've grown older, they have not been able to come to terms with it. I think a lot of people have woundings as children that have more expression later in their life when they are not able to deal with it, to have any kind of therapy or resolution or healing for that. And that type of wounding can express itself in lots of ways, and anger and frustration can be something like that. So other than that, I'm afraid I don't have too much to add to that or to respond. I hope that helps a little bit.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question, Yuan? Did you have any follow-ups about it?
Yeah, a little bit of follow-up. Yeah, I noticed in the chatting from like a Rachel said that it's from out of nowhere. Yeah, I'm always confused because it doesn't feel like it's part of you. I mean, technically speaking, I mean, we are all one, but it feels like just out of nowhere, all of a sudden, like you unconsciously pick up someone else's energy or something like that, maybe.
Yeah, I'm afraid I really don't have too much more to offer there. I'm sorry. It's a very unusual situation. I think that the desire, it might be something that the fasting could have an effect upon. That if the fasting were used with the purpose in mind of removing that type of a feeling, that it could be successful, especially if you're determined that that's something that you want to do, and that might be a way to go, and to use it for that purpose, and in your meditations to make a declaration, set your intentions for that. That could be effective.
Yeah. Raquel, I see your hand up. Did you have a follow-up question or clarification question on that subject? Your mic is muted. You'll have to unmute your mic.
Thanks. Hi, yes, Randolph, do you think you were absorbing his energy at any point? Because I feel like that happens a lot, where if you don't feel like it's coming from a source that maybe, or a blockage within you, were you absorbing any of his energy and taking that on and maybe starting to feel that that's what was rising up in you, was like the transference of energy and you absorbed it? I don't know if you ever experienced that, but I do a lot. So that's why I wanted to know, because I absorb other people's energy, and then suddenly I'm like, why am I so angry? Why am I so jittery? I'm shaking. And I'm like, where did this come from? And I realized it's not from me personally, it's from another source. So just wanted to make that clear.
You think that might be the case, Yuan?
I feel confused because most of the time when this situation happens, it happens when both sides are having a good conversation. Actually, it's not like which side is angry or somehow uncomfortable. Like both sides are pretty well, like quite enjoyable about the conversation, and both quality and and the info exchange. So it's there.
Interesting. Yeah, that is puzzling. Well, maybe Jim's advice to do some fasting meditation on it may well help with that. We do have time for one more question, and that is from Wayshower. Wayshower, would you like to unmute your mic and ask your question?
I would. Thank you very much. Yuan, can I comment on that just real quick? With that, with what Yuan was talking about, I just wanted to speak to that directly because I've actually been working with this type of phenomenon and energy myself recently. And one of the realizations that I came to was that if there are distortions in the lower chakras, typically the first or second ray, the excitement that can come up as a result of, say, a good conversation, like that will cause I don't know energetically what the mechanisms are at work, but what happens, what I've understood is that that energy, the excitement comes up, and then that energy filters through that distortion and can kind of cause that feeling of aggression. So it's almost like, I don't know if Ra would call it the love light energy or the light love energy is being sparked by that situation, because that happens to me too sometimes. When I get excited about something that's really happy, but then all of a sudden it like filters through something and I feel like aggressive and I've been sitting with it a lot, and that's been what's coming to me in meditation, is that it's filtering through some distortion in the energy system. So for what it's worth, I haven't uncovered the finite elements of that. I just wanted to say that. So my question for Jim is actually kind of transient, because we were talking about Akhenaten, and it was one of my questions I wanted to ask. Did Carla know anything about Akhenaten before she did the channeling? Before Ra channeled through her? Do you know?
To my knowledge, she didn't know anything about Akhenaten.
Okay.
None of us did.
Yeah, okay. I just thought that was really interesting, because it's one of those situations where that's such an on point like if you didn't know about that, it's such a real, like, you know, the historians of Egypt know that Akhenaten did that, you know, that he was that kind of rebel pharaoh that started preaching a whole different religious philosophy. And it was just interesting. I wasn't sure if she had any front-loaded information of that or not, and the fact she didn't is pretty powerful. So thank you for that. That was a huge synchronicity for me that you brought today, because I've been getting glimpses of past life information from that time. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Ashur.
Yeah.
Before we wrap up, Jim, I had one follow-up question to something that you spoke about a while ago today, and that was the entity known as Nona. I have seen references to Nona singing in more than a couple transcripts, and I was wondering, is there any recording of that anywhere? Did any of that get recorded?
It should have been recorded. I think Austin has gotten a compendium of at least 16 or 20 of those channelings, and they may be recorded. I would suggest getting in touch with him. He may be able to tell you more about that. I know that there was some interest here a few months ago in Nona, and somebody else was asking the same sort of question, and I think that's what sparked his interest in getting together some of the transcripts. And they should have been recorded, I would say so, because we recorded everything else that was happening at the time.
Yeah, I know there's recordings available of all of the 106 sessions of the Rock Contact, but I think I was assuming that the transcripts of all the Quo sessions and the L&L library are just the transcripts and don't include recordings.
I think they are just transcripts, but I think that Austin may have some recordings of this particular Nona.
Would love to hear. Can you think of any music or singing that is comparable to that, to similar to that? Or
no, I remember hearing Nona. It was very beautiful, and the notes were just inspiring. But I don't believe I could sing them right now.
No, I wasn't going to ask you to say. I was just wondering if you could think of any song or music that sounded like that.
No, it was something I'd never heard before or since.
Well, thank you for sharing. We are about out of time for today, and we are happy to continue this discussion at another time if we wish. Otherwise, Jim, as always, thank you so much for your service to others and being with us today. Did you have any last thoughts or reflections you'd like to share with us before we part ways for today?
Well, I'm always glad to talk with this group of folks. We've been together for quite a while now. I think we're kind of forming our own little social memory complex. And I think that, that's the way to learn, is to go together as a group. If the purpose of the creator and the creation is to help the creator know itself better, I think maybe we might have come a little distance today, and we always do, helping ourselves to know ourselves better, the creator to know itself better. So thank you all for helping me and helping the creator. Very grateful. I love you all. I hope you have a great week ahead of you after this one's over.
Love it too. Thank you so much for your being here and helping it happen. We wouldn't be here if you weren't here. So thank you for all you've done and all you continue to do in service to others. Thank you to all our friends at L&L Research for all they've done and continue to do in service to others. Thank you all for joining us today on this Zoom chat. Bigger group than normal. A lot of familiar faces as well as some new ones too. And I agree with Jim. It's nice as we get to know each other and do this better. I think we're all learning and growing and hopefully becoming better people. Thank you to everyone who's watching this recording on YouTube at some other space, time, space, in the love and light for the one infinite creator. Thank you all. Adonai. Namaste.
Thank you too, Jonathan. Love you all.